Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us in today's webinar, Supporting Kansas Veterans, a look at best practices emanating from the Sunflower State. We're very grateful to our friends at Lumina Foundation for their continued support, and to Strata Education for their support as well. And we couldn't do this without their funding and the work that it has allowed us to do. My name is Sarah Appel, and I'll be the moderator today. I'm the Multi-State Collaborative on Military Credit Manager from the Midwestern Higher Education Compact. Questions during the webinar, please submit those through the chat feature, and we will do follow-up as the presentation goes on. Just a quick overview. The mission of the Multi-State Collaborative on Military Credit, also lovingly known as MCMC, is to facilitate an interstate partnership of 13 states and to translate competencies acquired by veterans through military training and experiences toward meaningful college credentials. States exchange information and share best practices in the areas of articulation of credit, certification and licensure, communication, and data and technology. Our project goals are assist states and post-secondary institutions in aiding military-connected students with critical life transitions from the military to post-secondary education, and then from post-secondary education to civilian employment. Increase post-secondary education completion rates by creating models for the consistent, transparent, and effective awarding of credit for military training and experience that can be scaled regionally and nationally, thereby lowering the cost of education and reducing the time to completion. Establish a strong network of support, communication, documentation, and data collection among institutions and organizations for the purpose of promoting shared interests and tracking the efficacy of efforts to enhance military-connected students' educational success. We have 4 knowledge communities that meet on a quarterly basis. They are the articulation of academic credit, communication and outreach, data systems and technology, and licensure and certification. We have some wonderful presenters today that have been doing a lot of work in the state of Kansas. Today we have Connie Bean with us, who is the Senior Director, Adult and Career Technical Education at the Kansas Board of Regents. Samantha Christie Dangerman, who is the Associate Director at in the Department of Academic Affairs at the Kansas Board of Regents, and Carla Wiscombe, Director, Academic Affairs, Kansas Board of Regents. So thank you, ladies, so much for joining us, and I will turn it over to you.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks to everyone for joining us on the call today. And just a quick review of the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the collaboration with the U.S. Army. We have also held a Kansas Military Education Symposium, the first one of its kind in Kansas this summer, which was very successful, and we wanted to share a little bit about it with the group, and then talk about the Military Articulation Portal that we just recently launched and made live. So in collaborating with the U.S. Army, just a little bit of history. This is at Fort Leavenworth, where Army University was launched and is housed, which is sort of in our backyard here in Kansas. And so we have had conversations with them and talked about partnerships since they signed the proclamation for Army U a few summers ago. And so throughout this time period, we have really built a partnership with the U.S. Army while hoping to embrace other states into the initiatives that we are doing. So last spring, they were successful in inviting Dr. Casey Sachs, who's the Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education, to do a webinar at Army U along with our president, Dr. Blake Flanders, and myself and representatives from Army U, to really talk about the national impact of their initiative and what their goals were. We've also provided technical assistance to other states and my colleagues in the room as well as myself have provided a lot of phone technical assistance as well as visiting other states to help them get started on the same articulation path and using that same model that we have been. We've also, over the last years, partnered with Army U to develop articulation pathways for service members. So really, as we say here in Kansas, we don't use the word elective credit. Everybody, all the colleges here in Kansas will recognize ACE recommendations, but many times they award elective credit. So we very boldly say, if you're going to talk electives, you can't be in this conversation because it's really course-to-course credit and eliminating soldiers and service members from having to shop around for credit. Also, we're working to identify statewide critical occupation gaps, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about a pilot and model that we're developing that uses Department of Labor stats in the Department of Commerce jobs that are open in sort of backing into the MOSs in our state and what employment paths there might exist. We've also worked with Army U to develop their catalog, which I just mentioned. It was recently launched. And a couple weeks ago, my colleague, Dr. Wiscombe, as well as Craig Chandler, briefed the higher ed executives at the annual C.O.O.L conference. And then Army U has really worked with us to replicate the model that we've used nationwide. And so that's really where we've been welcome to providing technical assistance to other states to help them get on that same pathway. And the entire time also listening for best practices from other states as to what we might be able to implement in Kansas to make our initiative even better. So this last summer, we were approached by the Kansas National Guard about hosting a military education symposium. And having been a registrar, I've been a veteran certifying official, worked on the campus level, university, community college. I know many times the either lack of knowledge or lack of training for collegiate staff really causes some hurdles and some stumbles for our service members and veterans who are wanting to take advantage of their education benefits. And so we developed a one-page agenda, and anyone that would be interested in seeing that, I would be more than happy to share that. But the main topics you'll see on your screen there, we were able to have our Board of Regents there and do some welcomes by also our Adjutant General, which really places the importance on it when you get some of the people at a higher level to recognize what we're doing. But we provided resources for the financial aid officers, registrars, admissions, advisors, really anybody who would touch those service members and veterans coming to the campus to utilize those education benefits and really maximize those so that they really get everything that's available to them. We also did a workshop on best practices on forming military articulations, as we've talked about the course-to-course articulation where we bring in the experts and the faculty to talk about the real training that's happening. So we did a short workshop on that and then did a lot of networking with Army and agency leadership. And the next slide will show you the sessions. And as I said, I'd be happy to provide some more information, but we brought in someone from Washington, D.C. to talk about the GI Bill program. I'm not as familiar with the leadership within that, but the National Guard brought in those experts from Washington, D.C. to provide some of the updates. So the GI Bill, the Army C.O.O.L program, we had someone from our office talking about state tuition assistance. They talked about the Officer Commissioning and Scholarship Program, federal tuition assistance, what's happening with Go Army Ed, and those of you that work on the campus level and around Go Army Ed know how important that is to make sure that works for the soldiers. And then an Army University update. So we've really provided, it was maybe 9 to 5, and really put a lot into a short time period with a working lunch, and we do plan to replicate that next year. We think it's one of the best things that we can do to educate those that are on our campuses who are really working with the soldiers and the service members.
And Craig, I know that you're on here, so if you want to join in on the latest work that's happened with the Army course catalog, feel free, because it's definitely your area and what you've been working on. But we've tried to assist Craig in the process along the way with his developers and different ones, and we think that it's really going to be something that will be useful along with the professional development that Connie's team provided at our symposium to just help, make that implementation even easier and more seamless than it has been in the past. I know that Craig plans to use different links within the Army course catalog eventually that talks about, going right back to the state agencies. And I'm not sure they're there yet, but that's something that we're going to be looking to in the future. So Craig, do you have anything to add to that? All right, maybe you can't speak, but send us a note, Craig, if we're missing out on something. So the next slide just talks about, that's the full screen. The full screen of that. And Connie, you know more about what's in here, so I'm going to turn it back over to you on what's actually on the Army U catalog website.
So on the next screen, once you click into it, the previous was kind of a screenshot, and we encourage you. I know sometimes going out to the live website on a webinar it gets a little tricky, so we did not want to go out there, but it's armyuniversity.edu. And their whole goal in this whole time that we've worked with Craig and his team is to develop a website that's user-friendly for, selfishly, all of us in education. Because we learned early on we don't speak the same. They speak Army, we speak education. And so, and we, on our side here at the Board of Regents, we are not any former military. We don't have any military family experience or anything. So it's really been a learning curve. But kudos to Craig and his team because they've made extraordinary progress in the last couple years in getting this launched. But one of the biggest hurdles, as you know, when we brought together the faculty and the experts from the military, is the faculty, even if they look at an ACE recommendation, they don't really know exactly what is being taught. Even though there's an ACE recommendation for X number of credit hours, they don't really know what was the actual content. And what we found out during one of our convenings, and I believe it might have been HVAC or machining, welding, I don't recall which one, but our community colleges and the military, the schoolhouse, were actually using the same textbook. So they came up with some great articulations out of that, but until you have that conversation, you're not aware of that. And so we really wanted to have a website that the registrar could go out to look to see, or the advisor, or whoever might be looking at granting credit, what was learned, what is the military learning? The alternative to that was to get the POI, or Program of Instruction, which is so hard to read. In our education world, it's almost impossible to make heads or tails out of what was really learned in that. So what you'll see on the screen is a series of clicks that take you into course catalog details and then more information about that particular course and MOS. I will say, and I don't believe Craig can speak up here, and he might want to type in the chat, but I don't think it's all fully developed yet. I think there's a lot more to come, but there is a lot out there. So one of the other initiatives is the combining the joint services transcript. And so again, having been a registrar and trying to decipher a transcript and what was really learned and what credit should be given was just almost impossible. And so moving to something that is read more like a traditional transcript. And then at the bottom you'll notice there's a link to the Army U course catalog, which will take them directly back to more information about any of the military learning that they see on the transcript.
So this next slide tells you where you can go to do some shopping, so to speak. If you are a student with some military background and you want to know what kind of college credit you might be able to get with your military training, you can go to this website and take a look. This has been a long time in development. It really, a lot of the credit goes to our Data Research and Planning Unit. Cindy Ferrier, I'm director of that. We basically are feeding a searchable website or database based on the information our institutions enter into what we call program inventory. Institutions have been working to let us know what military articulations, that's kind of how we word it, they are awarding credit for. And if I'm a student and I want to see what kind of credit I can get, I can go to this website, and this is just a screenshot because like Connie said, when you get into a live website, it's a little bit tricky sometimes. But I can search by branch. So that first box, that first search box on the left side, you can look for Army, Navy, Marine Corps. Most of our stuff is Army at this point, of course. You can also determine if you want to search by occupation or training course number. This was a little bit tricky developing because we wanted to have good data that we could rely on. And you know, if you're familiar with databases, garbage in means garbage out. So you kind of really want to have stuff you can validate. So we got a lot of information off the ACE website to validate for our training course numbers. And for the occupations, I had a lot of false starts on this, but we got a hold of a really good source through the Defense Manpower Data Center to verify our military occupation codes. So you can search either way. And then finally, on the far right, I believe, I have to look at my screen to be able to see it. Sorry, bear with me. You can choose the level or your skill level or code. And basically, if you put that information into the search screen, you will be able to get a return on your search. And what comes up below is a list of the institutions and the occupations with the clickable information that you can click into to see what kind of course credit you might be awarded.
And this is something that is live, as Sam said. We continually have institutions submitting new articulations to us. They do come into kind of an approval status through our system, but really this is up to the institution to determine what they're going to award for each level and each specialty, and they can update it at any time.
These are just a few of the benefits, but this was put into a system that we already have in place. And you know, thanks to Cindy Ferrier, our Director of Data Research and Planning, and in Samantha, they did a ton of the background work and Cindy's team getting this done. Our institutions are familiar with program inventory. Our universities were familiar with program inventory, but not course inventory. So it was somewhat of a burden for our universities to start adding course information into our data system, but they all have been willing to do that, and hopefully we'll see the benefits of their labor. But the beauty of this is we no longer have to deal with the PDF and the paper copies to get approval of the articulations that our institutions are constantly creating through the work and their initiative. We have a current board member that is former military, and he's very closely looking at what our institutions are doing. So, and we annually report out the amount of military credit for our institutions. So this is just something that has been a long time coming. We're very thankful that it's here. And, you know, as with anything, this first year is going to have a few bugs to get worked out, but we're excited about the transparency and just the availability of the information that will be available to all service members.
And just an example of one of the benefits, and I know there are many student examples, but we don't always hear about those at the state level, unfortunately. One that we are aware of is a student that took his JST to one of our two-year colleges, and I believe that, I don't remember the career tech education program it was. I believe it was maybe HVAC or welding, I don't recall. But basically was awarded 30 course credit hours, deployed to Syria the next day, and finished his degree online. And so prior to, in Kansas anyway, prior to this initiative, that could not have happened. So it's exciting to hear those actual student stories.
This is just a list of the benefits that I think we've pretty much covered already, but it does create the opportunity for institutions to see what other institutions are offering and maybe take a look at that. Do I need to look at that again, and am I off on what I have previously articulated? And we kind of have a goal that they would at least be reviewed every 5 years. So, Sam, what's our future expansion on what we're doing with our math and what we're continuing to do?
I'll take that one. Okay. So we actually discussed today at lunch about what we're going to convene next, what MOS and who we're going to bring together next to look at articulating some additional specialties, bringing in the Air Force, which we now have contacts there to include them. And then one of Craig's colleagues and there at Army University had come up with the concept of developing an MOS to employment model. And so basically, and I'm sure everywhere else, you know, we have very low unemployment in Kansas. And so it's more of a thought, instead of looking at the MOS, which in education, that's what we were doing, is looking at the numbers in the MOS and then getting them college credit. And then there wasn't a then what, because we just hadn't thought that far out. But from the Army's thought is, why don't we look at the jobs that are available and back into MOSs that might be a fit for some of those positions. And so this is a very much edited slide, something that the Army University came up with. But basically, if you look at the right side, this is just a snapshot of a listing of jobs out of the Kansas Department of Labor site. But basically, it's a concept of look at what jobs are open and the numbers of jobs, and also the location and the concept of asking the soldier, where do you want to move to? And then drilling it down to what jobs are available in that area, and then backing into what courses are needed to get you into those particular occupations. So we are working right now with the Kansas Department of Commerce, the Kansas Department of Labor, and our office to develop an initial pilot as to what this might look like. What you'll see on the left of that slide is that we are very much a boots on the ground state, in that we have Fort Riley, which is just about an hour up the interstate from where we are sitting here in the state office building. And it's home of the Big Red One, which is it's infantry, it's artillery, very much a population of students with just high school diplomas. So this is it's a perfect opportunity for us to look at employment options for those people who maybe have a little bit of college credit but could easily move toward a career path while getting those college credit hours and degrees on the way.
And I'll just add something that Mitch Foley was doing with Fort Riley. He was actually taking soldiers that were planning to exit to communities in western Kansas that were needing employees and introducing them and kind of having a little meet and greet and showing them these are the jobs that are available in these towns. If you are interested, this is an employment opportunity. And we haven't had an update from Mitch lately, but it was really exciting, the progress that he has seen on just, keeping the exiting military in Kansas.
And so, and another point I might make is that the Army also looks at, so when the soldiers are getting training while they're in the military, then they exit and then there is no articulation. So they go back through a program at a college to get more training, many times very similar or the same as what they've already had. So the Army looks at it as basically we're paying for it twice. So in the model that you'll see on that slide, basically the state is the winner because the service member stays in the state and goes to work. The school is the winner because they get the GI Bill and the funding or a grant. The service member gets a job, and the employers are able to shape that candidate who was a really good soldier while they were in the service, and then the Army has an educated workforce and lower unemployment. So we'll have to check back on this one as we develop it, but that is in the process. And with that, we would be happy to answer any questions. I don't see any in the chat, but we would be happy to address any questions that anyone may have.
And this is Sarah. Carla and Connie have kindly listed their contact information, so if later you think of something you want to ask them, you've got their number and some contact. We have a comment from Craig Chandler. And Craig Chandler is the gentleman they mentioned at Army U. And he said, you guys are doing a great job. And just a note, all Army Vol Ed will be moving under Army University effective October the 1st of 2019. Also, Army U will include state articulation solutions like MAP, MVETS, MTAG into their National Credit for Military Learning database for soldiers. And they can access this information at any time on the Army University .edu website. So we're very grateful for that. Seth Castle, what does the forecast look like to get other branches of service more involved in the articulation process? Connie, any thoughts on that?
We actually do have, we've gotten some contacts in the Air Force, and Seth is one of our, he's actually on our statewide military advisory council. And I for a long time it was us not having the contacts. We now have the contacts, and we'll be including those as we go forward. At this point, though, a lot of the onus is back on the institutions to look at some of the other, examine some of those other articulations that other institutions have done and maybe increase the hours and really look at some of those suggestions coming from the state. So we will be continuing to do those convenings where appropriate. Right now we're sort of stuck on those 11 Bravos and 13 Bravos that you saw because those are, it's very easy to do these articulations when they link directly to a career tech education program such as auto tech or like I mentioned, HVAC or welding or machining. It's a bit more difficult when you're linking it to a MOS such as artillery and that type of thing. So we will probably use those as that initial employment pilot.
And the other thing that I will add is one of the reasons that our military portal took so long is we have the foundations and the structures for the other branches. We just don't have the articulations or nearly as many because we didn't facilitate those. But our institutions are more than welcome to go out and do those. Our military portal right now currently is able to upload those and sort those according to the branch. So I think the work's going to happen. And there was a question about the Army University being accredited. Craig, I'll paraphrase what you said at the C.O.O.L conference, the higher ed, when you talked about that it's a system. It's not an institution. It is a system. And so if that's not accurate, if you could add to that, Craig. But
it's not a brick and mortar institution. I think the theory with Army University, as we've worked with them, is they want to keep doing what they do really well and let the institutions do what we in education do really well, and us partner together. I think that might paraphrase one of Craig or his colleagues. I also see a comment from Joel about the apprenticeships, and that actually is the Department of Commerce in our state is doing that. So they initially have I think a pretty good model utilizing that. I also, Dallas had a comment about the CCAS, and ironically, the Air Force, I have their course catalog, they're very interested, even though they have CCAS, about incorporating Air Force courses into these types of articulations. So we have the contacts there now, and they will be included in the conversation as we go forward.
And one of the things that I learned when we had our last joint meeting with Commerce is it 3 months that the Department of Defense will pay for exiting military to go out and actually work somewhere? Was that the timeline? I can't remember the exact time on that, but that was pretty exciting to hear that they could actually go out and work in a job as kind of a temporary basis to see if that's what they want to go into, if that's a field that's of interest to them. I think that's what Joel was discussing or referring to.
This is Sarah. Craig jumped in, and he said that they've worked on the construction faculty panel with both the Air Force, the plumbers, and the Navy carpentry and masonry there in Kansas. So again, another example of that collaboration.
And they've all received a gentle reminder that they need to be submitting the articulations for that 12 series. So
a gentle reminder, yes.
Craig put up there the internship is up to 90 days, which I think that's a huge benefit to give the soldiers the opportunity to see, I'm interested in this, is this what I really want to do? And I would think the employers, it gives them a chance to kind of get a feel for the service members and if they're, if it's a good fit.
We do have a question. Will any user restrictions or policies change with the Go Army Ed after the 1st of October?
And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe Craig can answer that. He had briefed us earlier this summer that was coming. From an education standpoint, I think it's positive for it to be part of that, and he said there's no changes to current operations.
Mm-hmm. Great. Another question. Most colleges won't take the journeyman and craftsman credit, which is like the MOS credit for the Army. And we've kind of, I think, already touched upon that internships with soldiers, exit service are up to 90 days. Anything else that anyone can add to that comment? We also have that internship project is closely, let's see here, I scrolled too fast. It's closely associated with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So again, there is another fine example of collaboration. If the OJT or apprenticeship training is approved through the Kansas State Approving Agency, vets can use their GI Bill benefits for up to 2 years in those jobs. That's wonderful. We're very happy to hear that, and it allows the military-connected student to ease their transition and not maybe make them feel its pressure to hurry through. There's also a new project called Vet Tech, where they have partnered with organizations like Code Platoon to do the internship. So they're reaching out to employers who are very willing and accepting to do those kinds of trainings to get the folks they need to fill into their workforce. And we have another comment here. What change is happening in October that someone asked about?
And that was Go Army Ed is coming under Army University, or?
Right. Umbrella, yeah.
Correct.
And another comment is they don't have to be brick and mortar to be accredited. There are many online schools that are accredited. So that's a good point too. It seems that a lot of institutions these days are moving towards either completely online or hybrid because it's easier for folks who have to work to go to school or who have families, those kinds of things as well.
And so, just to clarify, I just wanted to, Dina's question was, is Army University accredited? They're not even a university. They're not offering collegiate or university courses. They're offering training that the accredited institutions can award credit for the learning that took place in the military training. So when we say it's a system and it's not a brick and mortar, that is kind of, that was the point that we were trying to make there.
It's kind of more of the umbrella or the collaborator in bringing all the pieces together.
Right.
And so they are not like CCAS. There was a question there, Sarah, about collaborating with mental health professionals. We have a couple articulations. We took a team down to the Medical Education Training Campus at San Antonio, Fort Sam Houston, and they have, we've articulated many of the medical programs that they're teaching there, one of which is the behavioral health specialist, and those are out on our website, taught by Washington University. So yes, we have collaborated in that manner with those programs.
Great. We also have someone who is willing to share a slide on the vet tech that we've kind of talked about that he picked up at CCME. And the question is, can I send it to you to share with everyone? And absolutely. Typically after we do the webinar, we send out the slides and any other attachments that come from the webinar. So we can easily include those into the messages to send to folks. Craig Chandler says the Army Youth System has 6 regionally accredited and 32 other schools accredited by other entities like FLECT, ACA, and under our TRADOC system.
And their officers training at TRADOC at Fort Leavenworth is accredited, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just a couple more questions I have for you. You touched upon data, and I know that this process has taken you quite a long time to complete. And so when do you think you'll be able to provide some data, and what data points are you collecting?
Sarah, our DRP unit here at Kansas Board of Regents has been collecting data on military actives. spouses or dependents of military veterans since I think 2015. Our first year or two were pilot years because our institutions weren't really equipped to ask all the questions that they needed to ask at that time. I believe a lot of our institutions are still working on getting students to answer these questions. From what I recall, it seemed that the best point at which institutions could get that information was during the admissions process. And so as you probably know, when you try to change anything on admissions applications, it takes a couple years in advance to really do that.
Right.
We have some data now on that, and it's kind of hard to get a real good picture on what percentage of our students are military or military connected. I'm going to throw out a guesstimate of roughly 5 to 7%. And we collect data on credit for prior learning awarded to our students. One of our categories is just military. That kind of falls under this umbrella, for these articulations. And about almost 40% of our CPL, our credit for prior learning, awarded last year was through military training or learning of some sort. So those are two things that we know now. Are there other specific data points we're talking about?
No, I just know that this project has, go ahead.
Well, this was really a point of interest when Craig and I presented at the Higher Education Executive Officers Conference. Just having something, and as I reported then, is we report out to our board annually, and they want to see that. So this was the first year that we actually reported out the number of credit for prior learning hours per institution. We had them divided up by sectors. We have the universities, and then just the total number of credit hours that that institution had awarded in the previous year, and there was a great deal of interest with that at the C.O.O.L conference. And just how are you doing it? We collect on 15 different categories, and there were really only like 7 or 8 that were the major ones, and military was the top one for the community colleges. Advanced placement was the top one for our universities, but it's just really interesting to look at that, and then after a year or two, we'll have a trend that we can kind of look at to see what is happening.
Sure, to see the progress going on. One other question that we have is, can you provide the credit hours awarded? This is great info, and I completely understand why, and I think everybody else on the webinar will as well. Most of our institutions want to track how they provide services for military-connected students. I know Gina Sabanya up at Minnesota State has been collecting data on service members, veterans, since I think around 2010 or 2009. But anyway, several years. And it's amazing once you start collecting the data and keeping that and see the progress that you've made is just amazing. And have you thought about tying any of the MOSs that you've got on your website to certificates and licenses that this training might lead to?
They are. I think they are, Sarah. I think it's more on an individual collegiate basis. So I think those are embedded within those programs. So I think the service member has the training, and that becomes a conversation between the college and that person. And I guess on our website we don't have a place for them to put in a certification because I think there'd be some other variables. They're not going to have all the coursework. One of the other things I'll throw out there is we are also 100% sure that our institutions have many more articulations than what we have in our system. So a lot of them are doing things as regular business that are not inputted into our system. So that's one of our goals also, is to really work with them to input what they are articulating on their campus and have been doing for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. And I believe, like you mentioned Army C.O.O.L earlier, that's just another way, another platform that military-connected students can utilize to look at those credentialing and licenses for the job that they're looking to either continue schooling in, or sometimes they can, with the training that they've already received in the military, go ahead and apply for those. So Army C.O.O.L is a nice free resource if you're interested. Any other questions? Of folks from Kansas, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I sent you some of the data slides that we had that we presented previously, so you can share any of those that you feel are appropriate.
Okay. We did get a reply from Craig Chandler kind of going back to the October 1st date. He says that C.O.O.L and Go Army Ed will move to Army University October the 1st of 2019 with Vol Ed. So there is some movement, and it's coming up in less than a month. So definitely something we need to be aware of. But kind of transitioning to the next slide, one of the things that we're currently working on is coming up with MCMC webinars and scheduling those for 2020. And one of those will be related to that transition and how that has gone and where things are placed. We thought about doing it in November, but then you start to get to the holidays and then it's graduation, and we thought that might be a good one just to do in 2020. Other topics we're looking at for webinars are the Army University Credentialing Program. Yes, Army University does have a credentialing program, and it's very slick. SkillBridge from the Department of Defense. A lot of you might be familiar or know that a new TAP exit course is getting ready to be released that's got some more time focusing on higher education, which I think we all have been wanting to see. And a fabulous new website that is coming from Navy C.O.O.L and Solid Solution for Information Design. It's called MILGEARS, MILGEARS. And again, it's a credentialing licensing tool that folks can use. Right now, they just have the Navy in there, but they are planning to have all of the other branches in within a year and then expanding that. So we'll be having a webinar on that as well. If you are interested in the resources that we have the past webinars located on our YouTube channel. And then we also have additional information on resources related to military credit and other various items on our website as well. If you would like to join the conversation, we most certainly welcome it at Facebook. We do have a Facebook page at MECMCMC. And again, my name is Sarah Appel, manager of the Multi-State Collaborative on Military Credit. And I really would love to thank our Kansas folks. They have been wonderful to work with. They are just on it. And we really want to thank them for starting a trend in our country of institutions starting to work quite closely with the military and coming up with forms of information such as you have on your website. So thank you, Connie and Carla and Samantha. We really appreciate it. And I just want to thank you all for joining us, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks so much.